Our guest this week grew up in Birmingham, Michigan, and quit college after 1 year to form DMA International to do direct marketing for financial services companies with $500 of his own money. He built that into a multi-million-dollar business and sold it in 2007. A serial entrepreneur, he's also owned a pro basketball team. And he just launched an executive coaching business. His name, Adam House. And we're honored to have him as our guest. And I'm Jack Krasula, and this is Anything is Possible on News Talk 760 WJR. I'm Jack Krasula. This is Anything is Possible, and we're with Adam House, who's a senior executive, serial entrepreneur, and a former professional basketball player at 6 foot tall. Adam, welcome. A real honor to have you.
I'm honored to be here. Thanks for having me.
Can we talk about your childhood and your mom and your dad, please?
Sure. So I was born in Grand Rapids, Michigan, moved over to the Detroit area when I was about 6 years old, and hardworking family. My mom has her doctorate in education, so it was obviously a very important thing for her was to focus on my education. And my dad was the ultimate guy's guy. Loved sports and other things, and taught me a lot about life.
Your parents divorced when you were 11. What's the biggest thing you learned from Mom?
Hard work and determination, and it's funny, the name of the show, Anything is Possible. She really taught me that from a young age, and it's something I still try to practice every day.
You have a stepdad that you think the world of. What has he taught you?
He's taught me a lot about patience, and life is a marathon, not a sprint. So being an entrepreneur and type A personality, a lot of times I like to shoot first and aim second, and he kind of balanced that out for me.
You've started and built a number of businesses, Adam. Really a phenomenal life, and very young. What were you like as a kid?
Depends who you ask, right? So, I was compared a lot to Dennis the Menace. I like to cause a lot of mischief, but I was always, super positive, even had the entrepreneurial bug as a kid. So when I was 10 years old, I was the leading popcorn salesman for the Boy Scouts. I used to go golf ball hunting and then sell all the golf balls to my dad's friends. And then I would even steal them back out of their bags and sell them back to them again. So, it's kind of that blend of, entrepreneurial / cutting the corners to make a buck.
All right. You went to Brother Rice on Lasher, and you played basketball for them.
I did.
How good were you?
Honestly, I wasn't a superstar, but I was a hard worker, and, I loved the game, had a lot of passion for it. And, Brother Rice taught me a lot about life. So I was, pretty troubled kid when I went there, and, they kind of made it, something that people wanted to be successful and wanted to do the right thing. And it had, a huge impact on me just for that time in my life of, my parents getting a divorce. So,
while you were still in high school and playing basketball, you went to work for a young guy. Who was it, and what happened to him?
I'm not sure if anyone knows Dan Gilbert in the Detroit area. So, it was, my junior year of high school. It was kind of one of those right place, right time. Rock Financial was, right in a rapid growth stage. And they put in a, job posting up for telemarketer. And so my buddy and I were like, hey, let's go down and, apply for the job. Him and I ended up getting it and just got a real passion for business. Learned a lot from Dan and his brother Gary and, some other employees there, and really just kind of set us on a, rapid growth path for, being a businessman.
Paint for us, Adam, a picture of Rock Financial / Quicken Loans back in 1995.
Wow, we're dipping into the archives there, but, they were constantly expanding. So interest rates at the time, I think we were, and again, I was 17, but, in the 80s, interest rates were high. And, as they were coming down, they had developed a program called Mortgage in a Box, which was kind of innovative at the time. You didn't have to go and sit face-to-face with their loan officer. So they were, FedExing mortgage packages out. People could fill it out and never have to see your banker. And so, just learned a lot at the time.
Why has, other than hiring you, why has Dan Gilbert become so successful?
Well, I think he's a great delegator, and, it's something I had to learn early on in my business career, being type A. I kind of wanted to do everything myself. So when I started my first business, I was in my apartment, and I had, 5 different phones set up, right? So it was extension 101, I was, accounting, extension 102, you want to talk to my manager? No problem. They were all me, right? So I'm marketing, I'm accounting, I'm sales, operations. So, I try to do a lot myself, but it was really when I started to empower other people that really helped me do the, 10% that no one else can do.
As you've watched him and read about him and seen him over these past 25 years, what has amazed you the most about Dan Gilbert?
I think the number of different types of businesses he's been able to impact and the longevity of it, and even surviving the financial crisis. They were all in on the mortgage and refinance industry, and to survive through that, and owning a basketball team and casinos, and I think really his belief in the city of Detroit. They've kind of been talking about, Opportunity Detroit, and we're, for at least 10, 15 years, and now it's finally, coming to fruition.
After 1 year, quit college. Why? And what did Mom say about that?
2 interesting questions. So my freshman year of college, I'd met some guys at Rock Financial, and they had called my friend and I that actually worked together in high school there, and they had left Rock Financial and moved down to Fort Lauderdale, and I was in Kentucky at the time, and they said, "Hey, can we fly you down here, and you live on the beach and work for us for the summer?" So coming out of Kentucky, going down to Fort Lauderdale for the summer, it was kind of a no-brainer. And while we were down there, it was a direct marketing company, and they had put together a commission plan, and, I think we kind of outsold what their expectations were for the, number of sales per month. And so by middle to end of July, early August, I was set to make, $10,000 to $12,000. So it was a 19-year-old kid living on the beach in Fort Lauderdale and getting a check for, $10,000. I was like, this is too good to be true. And so, as I mentioned, my mom, has her doctorate in education. That was always a big focal point. And so had that interesting phone call of, hey, Mom, great news. I'm about to make $12,000 in August, and I'm not going back to college. So, if she was able to reach through the phone, she would have and backhanded me. But, I was just kind of set on, hey, this is what I want to do. I love business, and ended up staying down there and worked there for a year and then left, and the rest is history.
Well, Adam, Bill Gates only spent 2 years in college, so it worked out pretty good for him, too. Okay, 1999, you're still in Fort Lauderdale, and you found DMA Incorporated.
Yes.
What did they do?
So we were basically developing statistical models to predict homeowners' current credit situation. So based on, debt to income ratio, home value, income, and basically targeted people for refinances. So we sold the lists, to mortgage companies nationwide.
All right, in 2007, you sell it to V12 Group. Why'd you sell it?
Well, I never even thought about selling our business, and in 2006, I hired someone from Qualcomm at the time, and they said, hey, this business is a cash cow. Do you realize, you could probably exit this for a lot of money? And they put the bug in my ear, and a couple of our vendors we had talked to, and they said, hey, we'll look at buying your business. So it was actually pretty interesting. In 2006, we got a cash offer for $20 million. And the company that was going to buy us had a security breach. And so we had a letter of intent, $20 million. And I woke up looking the Wall Street Journal, and I won't mention the company by name, but the stock went from, $38 to, next to nothing. And so I'm sitting there, and I was like, oh boy, this isn't good. A couple phone calls, and the deal fell through. So right around that time was the rumblings of the, financial crisis. And we were approached by V12 Group, and it was like October 2006. They want to see, hey, are you going to hit your numbers? Are you going to hit your numbers? So we did for October, November, December, January, February, March, April 2007. And they finally pulled the trigger. And not 60 days later, we had the financial crisis. So definitely, God's providence and right place, right time.
Oh, then you became the president of the financial services division for V12. You stayed with them for a couple of years, but then the entrepreneurial spirit hit again. In 2009, you started another company.
Yeah, so I didn't have any technology background. At the time, iPhone apps were, really popular, and people were developing apps and kind of becoming an overnight success. And so I found a developer, another, just random story. So at the time when you would go to a website from your iPhone, if it had any, flash coding on it, you would get, just these blue squares, so they didn't work on mobile phones. So I kind of saw that as a problem that needed to be fixed, and sent an email out to my entire database of contacts and said, hey, does anyone know how to build a website? And one guy replies. It was a guy from Detroit that I met at a Miami Heat game, and he said, hey, call this guy Martin over in Naples. So I called him. He's like, yeah, I could probably build that. And within a week, I hired him, and our first 15 customers were all Fortune 100 companies.
And a year later, 2010, you sell it to Acamel Technologies. Why'd you sell it within a year?
It was 18 months idea to exit, and Akamai at the time was trying to get into the mobile space, mobile technology, and we had acquired several of their customers, so they kind of went through the build versus buy scenario. And since we already had a good technology and were working with some of their customers, they flew me to Boston and said, hey, we want to buy your company.
Not only did you make a lot of money in Fort Lauderdale and get a great tan, you also outkicked your punt coverage one day when you married Vanessa from Miami. And then you convinced her to go to Boston. Okay, all right. But you're 31 years old, you're 6 foot tall, you're married, and you decide to become a professional basketball player. Maybe your mother understood, but what did you say to Vanessa?
So several things there. Number one, Vanessa actually did want to move to Boston. She was, done with Miami and the heat, which actually sounds pretty good right now to me. I love the beach. I think we were both born in the wrong places, right? So she loves the cold weather, and I like the beach. So the way I got to the pro basketball idea was after, I did my year earn out at Akamai. Vanessa was like, hey, you've been a CEO since you were 19. Why don't you do something you love? And so, of course, I'm in Boston. Everyone's doing the Ironmans and the triathlons. And, like with the running, I had no problem. With the biking, I had no problem. I got in the pool, swam down and back. And I was like, this is not for me, right? So I'm a land animal. And, I had another day where, I was like, all right, well, if I'm going to do the triathlons, I got to get the gear, right? So I buy these, tight pants and a bike helmet and, the shirt and the whole thing. I look in the mirror and I'm like, who are you right now? So looking at the training schedule, I was like, well, if I put that same amount of effort into pursuing basketball, I could probably make a minor league team somewhere. So for 6 months, ate the perfect food, worked out, 5 to 6 times a week, and went to a combine in Dayton, Ohio. And there were 40 guys there. And when I say guys, 40 kids, right? I'm the senior citizen in that park. So, so out of the 40 or so guys, they selected 3 of them, and I happened to be one of the 3. And so I went to the camp in Rochester, New York, and I think there may be 22 or 23 guys in the camp, and ended up making the team. So I said, hey, great news, Vanessa. I did exactly what you wanted, and we had just bought her dream home in Brookline, just outside of Boston. It was like a 1920s Victorian home. She had spent 6 months decorating it exactly how she wanted it. And I said, we're moving to Rochester, New York. And, she followed me and we did it. And so I did a year of pro basketball.
All right, you're 33 years old. Your teammates are 19, 20, 21 years old,
right,
from the inner city. How did you ever relate to those teammates, some of which were not even old enough to vote?
That is true. Growing up in and around basketball, I've always been able to relate in that environment. I was also chaplain for the Miami Heat when I was in Miami. So, just kind of understanding the game of basketball, and I guess I'm a likable guy. Depends who you ask. But, no, it was interesting. I mean, we'd get done with practice, and they'd all be going to, play Xbox, and I'm like, I have 3 kids and a wife at home, So, but, no, it was a great experience. Loved the team. It was a great organization. I had a, strong desire for winning and excellence, and I think at the time they had won 4 or 5 championships prior to me being there.
When you were playing in a game, 33, in this minor league pro basketball, what was the trash talk like by the opposition?
I don't know. I think they left me alone a little bit. Probably like, It was interesting. I didn't know what to expect kind of coming into it. Like, hey, who's this, rich white guy coming on the team? But I think a lot of the guys respected my work ethic and really to do what I did. I mean, it's, one of my greatest accomplishments other than, married and having, 4 boys. But it really was, just a great experience.
We're talking Adam House, by his own admission, 33 years old, a rich white guy. So what else do you do? But you buy the team. This is Anything is Possible. I'm your host, Jack Krasula, with Adam House, who, Adam, you go from being a 33-year-old player on a pro basketball team, and then one day you decide to become a co-owner of that team. Did you take your mom and Vanessa out for a dinner to make that decision, that announcement? How'd that go?
Well, like I told you, I like to shoot first and aim second, which isn't necessarily great for marriage. But after 18 years, I'm getting the hang of it. So they had found out my business background after I'd made the team, and the owner called me and said, hey, we could use a guy like you to help us, grow the franchise. And because practice ended at 10 a.m. and I had nothing else to do the rest of the day, I was like, sure, I'll jump in. And ended up signing a deal with Nike and a couple, sports nutrition companies. But it was basically during the same year, so I was player and co-owner at the same time.
In 2012, you're a co-founder and CEO of Qualmetrics.
Another great story. One of my board members from Velocitude had said, hey, I know you've stepped down from basketball. We had just moved back to Florida. I met this doctor. He's got an idea for a healthcare analytics company, but doesn't have a technology background. So I went and met with him at lunch, literally shook hands in the first meeting. And we had put together an analytics platform to help healthcare companies reduce cost and improve the quality of healthcare.
Okay, jumping ahead to 2016, you decide to come back to Detroit. Adam, why?
It's a great question. I ask myself that a lot, especially on days like
when
today.
We haven't seen the sun in the last 2.5 weeks,
right,
Adam.
Right.
Why?
Why? So I have, I mentioned before, 4 boys. And when we were in Boston, my oldest decided to take skating lessons. And, I only played hockey up until 6th or 7th grade, but I knew, what that entailed. A lot of work, a lot of money, a lot of trips. And I never thought he would stick with it, but I said, all right, son, let's do this. And, the rest is history, really. He fell in love with the game, even when we moved back to Florida, and his brothers all followed suit. So as he started to get better and better, we kind of saw where this was going, seeing 14, 15, 16-year-old kids, moving away to live with other families. And I told you, Vanessa loves the cold weather. She loved it when we were in Boston. And she said, hey, why don't we move, back to Detroit? So we flew up here, ended up getting Adam into the Total Package Hockey Academy, TPH. And it's one of the elite, if not the elite hockey school in the country. And they took Adam in, and in 3 years, he's become, one of the top players in the state.
We're talking to Adam House, who is a serial entrepreneur. Speaking of which, the most recent initiative is an executive coaching business.
Yeah, so, as we've talked about for the last, 20 years, I've built a lot of different businesses, a lot of different industries, and I feel I have a God-given gift to, see opportunity and take advantage of it and, grow companies. And so kind of this next, 10 to 15 years of my career, I want to help empower other people, to fulfill whatever visions they have, remove the barriers. And I certainly wish I had someone like me 20 years ago when I was starting my first business, just, someone that had been there and done that probably would have saved me a lot of heartache and challenges.
If there's a person listening tonight that says, I believe I want to start my own business, what would you say to him or her?
Just do it. I'm stealing Nike's, slogan, but you have to just believe, and again, the show, anything is possible. A lot of people are their own worst enemy, so having the right mindset and just believing, and you're able to do a lot more than you think you can.
Somebody listens to your stories and says, it's magic. This guy's like a Tom Brady. We're starting businesses. Have you had any setbacks, Adam House?
I have. So my most recent business was prior to the coaching. We were starting to sell products on Amazon, and I had never done that before, consumer product. And, it was tough. We got into a nuclear war with a toothpick is kind of what it felt like. I mean, the amount of budget that the companies we were competing against had, and I even fell prey to, chasing, shiny objects. You see online, everyone's got their, 5-step plan to sell on Amazon and become a millionaire. And when you get in it, sometimes, like I said, anyone's susceptible. So that's another reason, I started the coaching business is, there is no magic. It's mindset, it's following a process, and, believing in yourself and believing anything, is possible, is 90% of the battle.
Our lives are chapters. And when we had breakfast a month ago, you said one of the chapters of my life right now, Jack, is giving back.
And that's definitely, my parents, you'd asked me, kind of what they instilled in me, and that was another thing I always remember about my mom and, my grandfather. They were always giving people. So if it was the lady at Kroger, my mom could tell she was having a bad day, hey, here's $20, go have lunch. It was just something they instilled in me. So, I remember going to my first charity dinner, with Vanessa. It was for the Sheridan House Ministry in Florida. And it was for, parentless children and their foster children. And, I got pretty moved by the speech and, wrote a, several $1,000 check. And she just happened to look over and she's like, do we have that kind of money? And what are you doing? So, but I've always stretched myself in terms of giving financially. And now I'm really focused on giving my time. And that's, one of the main drivers of the coaching business is, giving my time to other people.
Speaking of giving your time, when you were back in Miami, you were a board member of Christian Community Foundation of South Florida, the largest Christian grant-making foundation in the world.
Yeah, so when I was in Fort Lauderdale, God showed me a lot of favor, kind of like, working for a Dan Gilbert here. I got connected with Wayne Huizinga, obviously founder of Blockbuster, Auto Nation, and many other things. Wayne Huizinga Jr. And he had just started. He was on the board of the Christian Community Foundation, which is a subsidiary of NCF, National Christian Foundation, and just had a good relationship with him. And he was a mentor for me, and just being a part of the Christian Community Foundation really connected me with some good businessmen in the South Florida area, and they were focused not just on money but marriage and family. So it was great to be a part of it.
We're talking to Adam House, and he says that God has blessed him greatly. We're going to go back to November of 2006 when God gave him a message. A serial entrepreneur and a former professional basketball player. Adam, let's go back to November 2006. What happened?
So at the time, we had just had our first son, Adam Jr., and I talked about my parents having a divorce when I was 11, and at the time, my mom remarried a saint, my stepdad. He came in and loved us as his own, and it was just a rough time in high school, just dealing with my dad kind of living in the same area, having a stepdad, coming to sports games, just dealing with the tension, like, okay, this is my mom and this is my stepdad, this whole how that all plays out. And at the time, when I was 19, I had a lot of anger towards my dad, and, I was going to church at the time, and, I had this, epiphany, like, hey, you need to, forgive your dad. So I wrote him this long letter and said, hey, I believe in God, and this is how our relationship's going to be, and I forgive you, but, had all my conditions to it. So I expected him to call me and say, hey, sure, I'll do whatever. It was just crickets. Right? Didn't hear a word from him. So showed how, he thought about it. But, long story short, when we had our son, and just, I felt, and again, God, spoke to me in whatever way. It wasn't, an audible voice or from a cloud. It was just, something I knew was like, Adam, you have a lot of hate and anger and unforgiveness towards your dad. So no matter what you said to him or wrote to him, in your heart, you have judgments towards him. And if you don't fix this, it's going to carry forward into, your life with your own kids. And I was just blown away by it. So I called him, told him I loved him, told him I forgive him for everything. And, now being a parent of 4 boys, and just imagining if I would have, kept that unforgiveness and hatred towards him, I could see how, that would carry forward. So he passed away in 2010, but we were able to have, 2008. And so it was shortly after that time, we got some good time together, and then he just dropped out of a heart attack in the driveway.
At this point in your life, you believe you have 4 pillars: family, entrepreneurship, health, and faith. So we've talked somewhat about family, entrepreneurship, and faith. What about health?
Health, it's funny. So it's always been an interest of mine. Even in high school, obviously being an athlete, you're, very focused on what you eat and how you eat and, the fitness aspect. But I've learned a lot in the last couple of years, about the mental health, which I've, neglected, kind of in the past of just, taking that time to, make sure you're healthy, mentally also.
It's obvious you've always been able to dream big. Where do you get the courage, or how do I get the courage, and how do I learn to dream big, Adam?
Like I just said, the mental health, it's mindset. People are their own worst enemy. And, if you believe that you can do anything, I really believe it is possible. It's just, a matter of time. If it's not good, it's not God, it's not over, is kind of what we, say in our house. If it hasn't reached where you want it to be, then God's not done with it yet.
For most people, change is great for everybody else. But I want steadiness, I want constancy. You seem to thrive with change. And in today's world, the only constant is change.
It's funny. I actually talk about this with Vanessa. She's like, you actually like conflict. Like, you like to argue, and it's just, it's a blessing and a curse, So I have a very hard time, with the status quo, which, can be a great blessing, but it's also, can be a challenge at times, kind of, works against me as well.
A lot of people that know you admire you for a lot of reasons. Who do you admire?
Let's see. I haven't really thought about it. So, I admire, people that can, stand the test of time, because I think time reveals all things. So, we have, some mentors in our marriage. They've been married for, I think, close to 50 years, that's really who I admire, is people that can make their marriage last, honestly, if I had to, give one answer. But, standing the test of time is another one.
What dreams or goals do you still have, Adam House?
My dream right now is to empower other people. And, with my coaching business, I believe strongly that I have a lot to offer. And, experience you can't really buy. You can't read it in a book. It's accomplished through life. And that's really, what I want to share with other people.
As our time winds down together this evening, what advice do you give to our young listeners?
Just keep believing and keep working hard. And, like I said, if it's, not where you want it to be, it's not over yet. I've had so many challenges in my life. It sounds great on paper, but there's definitely some ups and downs and sleepless nights and the stress, and there's a lot that goes into the end result of what's in your biography.
Adam and Vanessa and the 4 sons, welcome back to Detroit.
Glad to be here.
And we're glad to have you. Keep up the great work.
Thank you.
Please join us next Saturday. Until then, I'm Jack Krasula. Thanks for listening, and make it a great week, because with God, anything is possible. Spawn.